Winning isn't everything, but it's the only thing. In our business, there is no second place. Either you're first or you're last.
It was named after Vince Lombardi. You play in Green Bay. As important as it is to any other team, it means more to us.
When he walked into the meeting, he looked us right in the eye. He said, "Gentlemen, we're going to relentlessly chase perfection."
My first thought was, on any play with my arm strength, I may not let anybody know this, but my first thought was home run. On every play. On every play.
He did what? Fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No!
We're back on the Packers corner. Made it home safely from Lambeau Field. I'm ambivalent about that, but we're here to chop it up and see where things lie. I suppose we're not too happy across the board about the performance we just saw out there on Sunday. We know how Schmitty has felt the last couple weeks. He's been on toaster watch. I want to start out with you, however, Dad. Where are you at after this debacle on Sunday?
I'm just glad to see Schmitty's here, because if ever there was a toaster watch weekend, that was it. We kind of thought maybe there was going to be a little improvement, or you did anyway, and I really thought there might be some evidence of a team that was starting to ascend a little bit, even though I didn't pick the Packers. But that was about as bad an offense as you can have in the first half, when you had 4 3-and-outs, and amazingly still in the ball game at halftime, 10-3. So just didn't get it done in the second half. A little more of what we've come to expect. I've identified one thing that you guys might resonate with. We've been kind of pondering what is, and we've heard a lot of the so-called experts and the prognosticators talk about what's the identity of this team. I got it, guys. The identity of this team is we figure out a way to lose. It doesn't matter, veteran, rookie, coach, kicker, offense, defense, special teams, somebody's going to make a play so that we can ensure that and when we get close, somebody will step up to make that play to ensure that it is a loss. That's our identity.
Well, Dad, you're right. I did predict a little bit of a turnaround here. I thought that this was going to be the week we get it done, that Jordan Love was going to be the best version of himself. And I'm not, we'll maybe have to debate this. This might be a point of contention, but I'm not so sure he wasn't. I think he had a pretty good week. Unfortunately, no one was there to pick him up at all. It was a pretty brutal effort across the board. I told my wife heading over to Lambeau Field, at least one of us is going to be happy on the trip home here. We can pretty much guarantee that. Unfortunately, after the injury to Kirk Cousins, we had two unhappy campers on the route back from Lambeau. Schmitty, let's start here. I'm all sunshines and rainbows when we have the opportunity. What positives do you have for us after what we saw on Sunday?
Oh, good Lord.
That's a tough one.
What did they get excited about? Excitement.
I got one for you. I really like the effort we've got from Rasul Douglas, and I'm excited to see him the rest of the way here. Wait a minute.
Well, hold it. Time out.
There, Griffey. The fact that the Packers got the best player on defense this year, the guy that actually appeared like he cared on every down, the fact that they ripped that away from the team, that just says where the front office thinks this team is, at least right now in this state for this year. And honestly, I'm gearing up for this to be a 2-3 year span of sadness and a team with little to no identity. It's just really tough to tell. Jordan Love, honestly, until maybe 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter, I don't think he led a receiver in stride on a ball. It looks so bad, but I don't necessarily want to blame and put all it on him, because the whole unit just looks abysmal. you you have a bunch of young players, and I know when we started this at the beginning of the year, we were really excited about the prospects of where these guys could get to it in such a quick year, just, or in the length of a year, because they were going to get a bunch of playing time. We're now 8 weeks in, and we're descending. I didn't think that we could go any lower, and we watched a game on Sunday where it leaves you to wonder who is rightfully deserving of anything outside of Rashawn Gary. Thank God got a contract. Who is deserving of any of our fandom? I I'm not buying it. Even Jair Griffey got torched by a rookie receiver. That can't be the case. This is a team. I don't know who the leader is, and I don't think they do either.
Well, I think you did stumble across a positive there. The Rashawn Gary contract. It seems like he got paid, but it wasn't an egregious sum either. He's going to be a top 5 type paid guy as it sits now. But I think as we look towards the future, that seemed like it was a pretty reasonable contract. Did you have any reaction to what we saw the front office get done with Rashawn Gary there, Dad?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. I mean, clearly Schmidt's kind of saying it without saying it. This front office is setting itself up to look to 2024 and especially 2025. Problem is that if you're going to be that pitiful, you're not building toward anything. You at some point you got to show some progress. So I don't know how they plan to do that with the outfit they're running out there. And I think Schmidt hits the nail on the head. It's a rudderless ship, and maybe we can get into some of that. But you've got no veteran leadership. You've got no player. This was largely a player-led team, and what's one thing that Schmidt would probably like to hear, and you alluded to it last week with Rodgers and some of the other veteran players. A certain standard was set and it was not tolerated to have mental errors, jumping off sides, multiple drops. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers couldn't help this outfit out. I mean, they dropped the ball. They just look at the left tackle. And there's another reason. What is he doing in the game? What is 63 doing on the football field when he can't get in front of the rusher? And then when they do reinsert him after Yash Nyman gets his foot dinged up, the first play he jumps offside. The kid isn't ready. It's an abysmal example of the leadership at the very top not knowing who they should be playing, not playing the proper personnel, not setting a standard. So it's a bad deal all the way around, and I'm not sure who's going to turn it around. But I will say, and I agree with you, I think Jordan Love is the least of the problems. I mean, he had what, 230 yards passing. He had 2 balls at the end. Christian Watson had his hands on a 50-yard bomb into the end zone that he has to come down. You're just seeing Jaden Reed had his hands on another 40, 50-yard ball. He had a 300-yard passing game there. And so with 6 drops and penalties, I'll be quiet now because I think you get the idea. We just got a whole bunch of guys who aren't living up to the Packer standard.
Well, let's focus on Jordan for a second. I got a couple of clips here that'll all make all of our stomachs churn. It was pretty brutal, and these guys didn't go out there and make any plays for their quarterback. But I think you do raise a good point. In a interviewer asked Love after the game too about what does he need to do to get more out of these guys, and he is so much the type of leader. He's like Alexander the Great being brought a helmet full of water was all they could scrounge forth from the desert, and he tosses the helmet into the desert and dumps it out. And if there's no water for my men to drink, I'm not going to have any either. Type of a guy. He refused to throw any of his teammates under the bus, and that's certainly admirable. By the same token, as we look, whether it be Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady or all kinds of leaders across different stratas, they're pretty demanding of the guys around them at the same point in time too. And I think that's maybe the next phase for the leadership from Jordan Love. I think the throws we're seeing here are actually pretty darn good, and it's time to demand more from those around him. Do you have any thoughts on Jordan Love developing into that type of a leader, Schmitty?
Certainly, you would expect that to be the case for a guy that was drafted in the first round. When you get vetted by any professional football team, and you get taken in the first round, you're doing and saying the right things. I'm sure. I'm I'm positive that he knows how to carry himself when he's getting asked questions. I know when he's working, when he's studying, it seems like he knows how to do the right things. I got giddy when they played the Saints. I've been giddy about this guy. All right. There are sparks there. There are things to get excited about. It's just you have such poor play around you. You really can't evaluate how good this guy just might be. And so it's unfortunate that we're in this situation where we're now going to have to figure out how do we string this guy along contractually, right? To know, because you're not going to flip him $150 million anytime soon. You got to see next year, the year after. It's going to be one of those interesting stories that plays out. How do you keep this guy employed, and how do you figure out if he's your long-term solution or not? We'd like to think so. Right now, the story still needs to be written.
I think that's definitely true. Another guy whose leadership I want to talk about and get your thoughts on here, Dad. I was actually speaking. Well, you're familiar with Papa here, Schmitty. My grandmother on that side of the family, my dad's mom, is Nana, of course, and I think Nana summed it up pretty well talking about the Packers this week. We got onto the topic of Matt LaFleur, and she said, he's helped us win a lot of games. He had a great start to the career. Seems like a nice, smart, knowledgeable guy, but she summed it up in one line better than I think anyone else could put it. She said, I think he just might be a little better suited if he was like a high school tennis coach. And I think that's kind of true. Tough to be too hard on the guy, but I think she was hitting on something that's really true there. Do you get a sense and a feel that there's some truth in what she's saying there, Dad?
I'm just going to argue with you on the point that it's tough to get too hard on the guy. I think it's time to get hard on this guy. I mean, I've done it. I'm right there. I'm right on the edge, on the precipice of let him go and turn it over to Rich Biasica. I'm just right there on the edge. Prime example. We were in that game with 8 minutes to go. Preston Smith gets a sack fumble. We take the ball on the 12-yard line. If we score with 8 minutes to go, maybe we go for two. It's a one possession game. Holy mackerel, we got momentum there. And what does he do at the precipice, at the peak moment of the game, when the playbook can be opened up? He sticks A.J. Dillon in the game and runs him up the middle for a loss of a half a yard. If that isn't the most brutal thing in the history of football, it's only second to not going for it on 4th and 8, which I brought up a number of times in the NFC Championship game, so I won't go there again. But these kinds of decisions, when you start seeing it over and over, and then in the post-game press conference, he's asked about Jonesy. Jonesy needs to get the ball more, and that's on me. Well, for the love of God, you can't keep saying that over and over and then not even have him in the game at the most critical moment. So these kind of egregious judgments begin to add up to me to make me highly question whether he isn't losing the locker room to some extent. If we can see it from 500 miles away, whatever we are, 300 miles away, the players can certainly see it from 10 feet away. And I would just add, now I'm getting a little bit flippant here, but maybe he'd be best suited to be the girls' tennis coach. I'm not sure, but that's kind of where I am at the moment. I hope he proves me wrong, but I don't know how he's going to do it. I don't know.
Schmitty, your thoughts on MLF?
I think it's time, Griffey. I think it's time to roll the guy. Like I've said in a couple previous shows, that it's maybe he's just not suited for this. Maybe Rodgers just hit a lot of the problems. It's hard to think that you're going to want to see any Packers fans going to want to see this for any more time than what we're going to spend. He's going to get. I don't think he gets rolled this season. I certainly don't think that's going to happen. But I think he'll be given one more year with Love because he's still on the contract. But if he can't right the ship, if he can't show towards the end of the season, outside of the Chiefs, there's a lot of winnable games on our schedule, and if you can't be competitive or get a performance like they did it when they played the Bears week 1, and there's no excitement going into the offseason, you are going to be fielding so many questions about are you capable to lead a football team? And right now, everyone wants his head on a spike, and I'm one of those people.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest condemnation on LaFleur is how well we played out of the gates and how far we've fallen. With the young group of guys that we had, taking a step back was never the goal, and maybe we were a victim of our own success having such a big win against the Bears. Really, an impressive showing against the Falcons until the fourth quarter got away from us. But you could write that off at the time, as this is a young team. There's going to be some growing pains. And then the tremendous come from behind victory at the Saints left us all riding high. But when we start out like that, the expectation is this is going to build. We got this young nucleus. They're going to get better as the season goes on. And there's no doubt about it. They've gotten worse. And so that has to be reflected. And this buck has to stop with the head coach when you see that lack of development, at least to this point in this season. So I'm right there with you guys. We have an opponent with an injured quarterback coming up this week, it looks like, in the Los Angeles Rams. Have you heard any update on what's going on with Matthew Stafford here, Schmitty?
Well, I can only base it off of what the line is set at, and the Packers are favored by 3 points, if you can believe it.
Oh
And I
my.
think that would be indicative of Stafford not playing. And it's so recent, the injury, the UCL. I don't foresee him playing. I'm not sure who the backup is, but if that line doesn't move, it's pretty telling that he won't be there on Sunday.
Yeah. And so UCL in the thumb for our listeners, not the UCL in the elbow like Brock Purdy or someone like that. So maybe he's a tough guy, right? We've seen him do some Favre-esque sort of things, gutting some injuries out. But I think what you're seeing there is the line reflected in Vegas. I can't imagine someone having us a 3-point favorite against any NFL team with a starting quarterback at this point. Is it in our best interest at this point to go out there and win that game, Dad? Are you still holding out hope, or is it time to start looking towards the draft like Schmitty might be prone to do?
Absolutely not. You've got to get this team to believe in itself. You've got to get a read on where Jordan Love is. You've got to raise some kind of level of competitive juice. What and begin to see what you have in a lot of these players. Is Christian Watson, who we saw last year, or is he this guy who mistimes he plays like he's 5'10" instead of 6'5"? He's out there with guys 4 or 5 inches shorter than him, and he can point the ball on multiple occasions now. So is he just rusty from being off the field at the beginning of the year, or is this who he really is? So we need to find out who some of these guys. We need Luke Musgrave. Could he be more of a disappointment from what we saw in training camp? This 21-mile-an-hour runner who's fastest guy in the field at 6'6", 250 pounds. I haven't seen a single play that shows me any upside to this kid. And apparently they say it's there. Jaden Reed, I'm not giving up on him. I like basically what I see there. He had a bad play in this game, but I'll give him a pass. But so, yeah, there's so many players. Who on this team is playing to expectation? It's a very small list. Even Jair Alexander's not playing to expectation. You probably say Preston Smith is playing up there. You probably say Rashawn Gary is. I think maybe the kid from Georgia in the middle linebacker position, Walker, is showing some signs. Our defensive coordinator, don't even get me started. I mean, good Lord, for the love of God, we have a beautiful game plan, or we have executed a beautiful defense against the running game, but 3rd and 8, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 14 doesn't matter. It looks like Kirk Cousins is in the defensive huddle. Although they're going to rush 4 and drop back into a soft zone, all I got to do is run crossing patterns and wait for him to come free. Give me 2.5 seconds to throw the ball, and I'll rip you apart. I mean, that was the whole. And then, as if that isn't enough, when the backup goes in, he completes a 3rd and 8 ball on the 5-yard line. And so, I mean, that maybe is the number one reason that I'm so against Matt LaFleur. He has retained this guy who is just not got it. And so maybe LaFleur doesn't have it. I have two little other items of business I want to get to here. We had somebody write in to the podcast with an observation. You know what I'm talking about, Griff? The former mayor of the big city of Hudson
Mr.
was
Mary Allen Burchell was in the comments. Yeah, he was giving you a hard time.
my buddy, my golf buddy, who we've talked to a little bit about the Vikings #1 draft pick, the 160-pounder, who's a good ball player. I never tried to insinuate he wasn't. He's a shifty little guy with a lot of moves. But there they are with no plan, apparently, a quarterback. They're all over the waiver wire trying to pick somebody up. And I just found it very interesting. I was just watching JT O'Sullivan break down Will Levis's rookie debut. Makes us a little bit envious with Jordan Love being a third-year player with a 4-touchdown performance over who? The Atlanta Falcons, who we lost to. And it'll be very interesting for Viking fans now, because I'm going to be following closely the career of Will Levis, and they may rue the day that they did not step up in the draft at the 23rd pick and take a kid who was rated to be a top 5 pick and just let him pass down the board. So, Mr. Mayor, my good buddy, you may still be right about the kid, #3. What's his name out of USC? Addison?
Yep.
But I would say it's a very logical thing to surmise and pontificate about what things would have looked like if you took that quarterback, Will Levis, especially right now, given the situation that you're in. So that is the #1. And the other one, maybe we do later, maybe we do it now. I think the big question about what's going to happen with our coaches is what's going to happen with Mark Murphy. What kind of legacy does he want to leave? He's got mandatory retirement in July of 2025. Does he want a lame duck bunch going out with a sputter and a thud? Or does he want to make a statement? If he wants to make a statement by 2025, he's got some long and hard thinking to do about the regime that he has in charge right now.
No, I think that's a good place to go here next. We've focused a lot this season, and with good reason, on the quarterback, and that's been fun to follow. But I think we've given our 2 cents there a few times. Let's go to Mark Murphy a little bit. Schmitty, start here. How do you think of Mark Murphy's tenure in general, and then we'll look towards the end of things here. But how do you feel about what he's accomplished to this point as the president of the Packers?
The guy that walked out on Aaron Rodgers. The guy that walked out on Aaron Rodgers. He spearheaded the whole operation. I'm sure of it, Griffey, putting it in their ear like little finger, like making sure that Rodgers would be no more on our team. It's a damn shame. We should have done everything we could have done to keep the guy. Made him happy. Brought in Jordy Nelson. I don't do a Jordy Nelson bobblehead night every time they show up at the stadium. I don't care. They should have kept him. His legacy will be that he won 1 Super Bowl over his tenure with the best quarterback to ever play football. That's what it's going to be. That's how I'll remember him.
Well,
And I'll remember him, Griffey, as the man that brought in Gutekunst, who, if you look at his drafts, Griffey, over his tenure, he is the reason why we are in this predicament. That man has no business selecting any more football players for the Green Bay Packers. So I'll remember Mark Murphy for some of the terrible hires that he's been a part of and letting the guy that meant most to the Green Bay Packers organization take a walk. That's how he'll be remembered for me.
Well, let me add on to that. Not only did he run Aaron Rodgers out of town, he ran Brett Favre out of town too. He was there at the end for Brett and was part of that whole changing of the guard. And early on, I bet he was pretty happy with how that worked out. Thought maybe we could recreate that here with Jordan Love. We'll see how that transpires. That's really going to be how he's judged from posterity's sake. But he clearly is and strongly implemented the let's move on a year too early rather than a year too late ethos on a number of guys. Now, maybe Aaron Rodgers was the lone exception, That might have been a year too late, you could argue. But we've hashed that out on the show before. Dad, I'm sure you have a little bit of pushback. We won a Super Bowl with Mark
Oh,
Murphy. We've been one of the most consistent organizations in football, other than the New England Patriots, over the course of the 2000s and 2010s. We only had one Super Bowl to show for it, sure, but there's got to be some positives that can be said about the guy too. Are you all on board with Schmitty?
I think I'm about to go on toaster watch after listening to that diatribe from Schmitty. No, I couldn't. Let's say this: the final chapter is yet to be written, and the final chapter here is about moving on from a 40-year-old quarterback who was had us in salary cap hell. And if you didn't do it at the appropriate time, you were going to linger in salary cap hell and really be hamstrung for a number of years going forward. Now, do we have the right regime, the right mix of players? I think that's all arguable, but our salary cap situation is going to be very good in the next couple of years. And so if you can find a few gems amongst these guys, and I think you got a few that look like they could be players. I think Jaden Reed looks like he's going to be a player. I think Dobbs is. The questions are Quay Walker is a player. You got a couple of linemen on the defensive side of the ball that look like they're going to be good ball players. We'll see about Eric Stokes and some of the others. So there's a lot of question marks. And I will agree with Schmitty that it's a very tough period right now. And I think maybe Mark Murphy has his defining moment still ahead of him. What's he going to do to help this bunch turn the corner? What are his judgments going to be? But I think if you look backward, we were in 4 NFC championship games. Rodgers couldn't get us over the hump in a couple really close ones where we needed one play. I'm not totally blaming him, but I think a general manager can't go out there and throw the ball and catch the ball. He can just put guys in a position, and it's a pretty good record to have been in 5 NFC championships if you include the one where we won the Super Bowl. So I think a lot of organizations would take a leader who would put you in that position. So I think on that basis, you would have to call Mark Murphy's tenure to date highly successful. Now, how he leaves the franchise on the way out is going to be the true measure because we know who the real hero of this franchise was that turned it around for you guys who were in diapers when it happened. It was Bob Harlan. Bob Harlan completely turned the organization around. It had been a organization run by a 10-member committee. Too many cooks in the kitchen. They turned it over to Bob Harlan. He brings in Ron Wolf or hires Mike Holmgren and acquires Brett Favre and Reggie White, and the rest is history. And then Bob Harlan comes back when the President Jones, who was just bad news and had all kinds of trouble for a year or two, and Bob Harlan came back and hired Mark Murphy. So, yeah, I think a little more complicated than Schmitty might have made it in terms of where we are. But certainly, I can agree with Schmitty. We're at a pivotal moment, and we'll see what Mark Murphy does now, and that'll go a long way toward his legacy.
Well, that Mark Murphy, I think I'll leave you with this. He's a complicated fella. That's what I would have to say about him. Um, well, let's look back towards our matchup coming up this next week here. Let's get some thoughts on how that's going to turn out. We got the early line from Vegas looking better than we might have anticipated. But Schmitty, walk us through our thoughts. Are we going to live up to that line? How are you feeling about the matchup this week back at Lambeau Field?
It absolutely sickens me. It sends a bad tingle down my spine, but watch me do it, Griffey. Uh, the Packers win this football game. It's a real damn shame that this is what we have to do. But you're walking a tightrope, 7,000 miles in the air. You want to be a bad team so that maybe you get a player in a draft that could be the cornerstone of your franchise. But you also don't want to see the next 2.5 months be absolutely terrible, and you literally come out of the season knowing nothing about your football team and who you can rely on going into the next year. Uh, if they don't have Matt Stafford, I know we did the caveat if Matt Stafford doesn't play, if he does play, then maybe the Rams win this. If I think they win this game regardless. If they put Matt Stafford in, they're probably in trouble because you got a quarterback with a bad thumb, and we know what that looks like from last season. So the Packers get this done, Griffey. I think they win by 9 points, 27-18, and that's your ball game, my friend.
I like it. Let's inject a little optimism as we sit here now. We're a game and a half out of seventh place in the playoff race there. Imagine that. So win against the Rams would be
Playoffs,
consequential to that end. So
playoffs,
a game and a half. Game and a half.
not
That's all I'm
practice,
saying.
playoffs.
So Dad, we got the Los Angeles Rams coming into town here. What do you think about our prospects?
Well, I said I wouldn't pick the Packers again until they proved it to me. And the number one reason for my pessimism is, for the love of God, under God's green earth, would Aaron Jones possibly touch the ball 15 times in a game? And I said this actually in the last game, that if Aaron Jones touched the ball 15 times, and or if the combination of Aaron Jones 15 to 20 times, I think I said,
You
which
told
would
me
be,
20 on the phone, and I just about,
yeah,
drove off
I
the
well
road.
at 20, and or if he and Christian Watson had 25 touches, that I would pick the Packers. And it should be a pretty elementary formula, but I don't trust the coach to get it done. So I'm going to qualify this by saying I don't believe Matt LaFleur will get the appropriate amount of touches. But if can I say that if Jonesy touches the ball 15 times and or the combination of Watson and Jonesy reaches 25, the Packers will win. And I don't think it will, so I can't pick them.
Fair enough. I thought this year that we had some pretty exciting talent on the outside, and this most recent game has really rattled me. Um, Digging into the stats and who these guys on the outside are, we have a cast of characters: Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Luke Musgrave, Dontavian Wicks, that all had double-digit percent drop rates as collegiate players, and we've seen the trend continue. At some point, is that who these guys are? I'm starting to think it might be. Maybe we'll hit on one of those guys, but I really expected that group to pick Jordan Love up, and they haven't done it. I don't think they're going to do it. I think the defense is going to find a way to give up more points than they should, and that we're going to be sad again here with another loss for the Packers, but maybe it'll work out in our advantage as we get ready to go get a guy who doesn't have a double-digit percent drop rate in Marvin Harrison Jr. Might push us closer towards that goal, so we can hope for that. And maybe, just maybe, they'll find a way to win it, and we'll sneak to within a half game of that seventh seed in the playoff race. Any final closing thoughts to leave our viewers with here, Schmitty?
Gentlemen, viewers of Packers Corner, strap in. It's going to be just a terrible ride the rest of the year. Uh, I can't imagine that there's going to be a lot of optimism. Usually, it's me that's bringing the whole group down, but the people that I do this with, Gar and Griffey, I'm turning them very easily. They're about to be submerged in the deep black water, just like me. I can already see it. They're losing their capability to be optimistic, and rightfully so. So I'm really looking forward, Griffey, to reviewing all of Goody's bad draft classes, and what can we do in Title Town? Maybe we can put in a pool. Maybe let's talk about adding hot tubs into the end zones of the stadiums. So let's do some obscure talks here as the season progresses, because we know that the football team, as it stands, is just going to be an absolute mess. And so maybe we can start bringing in some more spicier topics.
Fair enough. Dad, anything to leave us with here?
I guess my parting thought would be that I really think Jordan Love has some potential. I just think he's surrounded by a bunch of buffoonery, and so I my negativity does not arise around Jordan Love. Now I'm not saying for sure he's going to be the franchise quarterback, but he sure has some tools. I like his composure in the pocket. I like his demeanor. I like his arm talent. And I think he's been put in almost the worst position you could be. You could arguably say he has the worst weapons in the NFL right now, based upon some of your deep dive into the statistics and the drops and let's not even mention the penalties and then the ridiculous game calling situations from his head coach and offensive coordinator. So while I'm not very excited about the leadership, I think Jordan Love has potential. Can we find a few diamonds to build around? And that's what I'm going to look forward to going forward. My most exciting thing that they could do would be to let MLF go and put Rich, what is it, Biasica, the Italian. How did things go the last time we had an Italian running the show? Looked pretty good. He led the Raiders to a playoff berth. Could you imagine such a thing? That would light a fire under me. I'd get all excited if we put old Rich in charge and he revitalized the spirit of that. Because I think the energy's been sucked out of that bunch by the way things have been managed. So that's kind of where I am. I'm not giving up, and we'll see what happens. And I do have some good feelings about Jordan Love, but boy, we gotta help him develop. And I'm worried that the leadership's headed in the wrong direction in that regard.
Well, I think you got our Italian listeners fired up on that closing thought here. I know Ben Christensen will be celebrating for one, so you got that going for us. No, thanks for joining us here. I have one closing thought, which was the Packers brought to light a new type of play, a new type of error that I hadn't seen before. They had a play early in the first half where none of the receivers ran a route, and Jordan Love decided to pass it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as being a unique and infamous type of a play that I had never seen before. And it completed a pass. Unfortunately, we had a couple guys downfield. But hopefully we remember to run routes on all the applicable plays moving forward here. That would be at least one step in the right direction. Thanks for joining us here, guys. You have a good night.
Happy Halloween. Love
See you next
all.
time.